It was 6:42 a.m. when I realized I wasn't alone. From my porch coffee steaming in hand, I spotted the faint glint of binoculars peeking above a cactus, and right behind them, the unmistakable blonde bun of Daphne Whitmore, president of the Sagebrush Meadows HOA. She wasn't hiding well, not with her shiny Prius parked halfway up the dirt road and her fluorescent camo jacket that looked more like a fashion experiment gone wrong. That's when I knew the war had begun. 3 days earlier, she'd zip-tied a laminated notice to my gate accusing my windmill of being an unapproved structure. Today, she'd escalated to full reconnaissance. My land wasn't even inside her HOA boundaries, but Daphne had a gift for believing every grain of sand reported to her, and me, I wasn't about to bow to a clipboard in yoga pants. Before we dive in, tell me where you're watching from and what time it is there. Drop your city in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more real-life HOA drama, revenge, and chaos, because this story only gets wilder from here. The first time I realized Daphne Whitmore wasn't just another HOA president with too much time and not enough hobbies was the morning she decided to spy on me. You might think I'm exaggerating, but when you've lived long enough in a small desert county like Silver Butte, you start recognizing the look of someone who's decided your life is their next community project. She crouched behind a prickly pear cactus, peeking through binoculars, like some suburban commando on a secret mission. The desert sun hadn't even risen fully yet, and already the air shimmered with heat. Her Prius was parked crooked at the end of the dirt road hazard lights, blinking like a beacon of absurdity in the middle of nowhere. From my porch, I took a sip of my coffee and thought, so this is how it begins. 3 days earlier, I'd woken up to find a laminated notice zip-tied to my front gate. The edges flapped in the wind like a challenge flag. In bold red letters, it read, "Violation unapproved structure, immediate compliance required." Beneath that was a grainy black and white photo of my windmill, the same one my great-grandfather built in 1932, the one that had survived storms, droughts, and 2 generations of bad government. Apparently now it had violated visual harmony. I remember standing there barefoot in the dirt coffee cooling in my hand, trying to decide whether to laugh or to send her a thank you note for caring so much about my property. I ended up doing neither. Instead, I grabbed a marker, scribbled on the bottom of the notice, "File under G for garbage." Then I taped it right back on the post and went about my day. That should have been the end of it. But Daphne Whitmore wasn't built like the rest of us. She was the kind of woman who color-coded her grocery lists, kept HOA bylaws laminated in her purse, and probably said the Pledge of Allegiance before brushing her teeth. By Wednesday, I started getting strange looks from a few teenagers on electric bikes who rode by the ranch, slowing down just long enough to stare at my windmill. Thursday morning, I got my answer. A white SUV stopped at the gate. 4 people stepped out like they were reporting for duty. 2 teenagers in khakis and bike helmets, a middle-aged man with a clipboard and a radio clipped to his belt, and another who looked like he'd just lost a bet. On the door of their vehicle was a magnetic decal that read, "Sagebrush Meadows Compliance Team." I swear I could feel my coffee curdle. They marched up my driveway with the confidence of mall cops on a mission. One held a tape measure. The clipboard guy looked ready to deliver a sermon. I waited until they were halfway up the path before stepping out of the barn, wiping my hands on a rag. Now, I'm not a small man. 20 years in the Army leaves a mark, broad shoulders, a certain way of walking that says, "Don't start what you can't finish." I was wearing torn camo pants, a sleeveless flannel, and a scowl that came naturally before coffee number 2. But what really froze them wasn't me. It was Brutus, my longhorn bull, standing right behind me, chewing on a porch cushion like it owed him money. The clipboard guy blinked twice, opened his mouth, and said, "Good morning, sir." "Morning," I replied. "Did you bring donuts?" No, sir." "Then I'd suggest you turn around and get off my property before I gestured to Brutus decides to introduce himself. They hesitated for all of 3 seconds before turning as one and power walking back to their SUV. One kid dropped the tape measure and didn't even stop to pick it up. Brutus snorted unimpressed and went back to his cushion. I tossed him a slice of apple. "Good boy," I said. Later that afternoon, when the desert wind kicked up dust across the hills, I built something special, a scarecrow wearing a pink cardigan, fake pearls, and a sash that read Queen of Covenants. I topped it with a laminated photo of Daphne's smiling face, pulled straight from the HOA website. Petty, maybe. Therapeutic. Absolutely. The next morning, I woke to the soft hum of a drone. It hovered above the barn, sleek and black, its camera glinting like an insect's eye. I waved at it. The drone darted upward and vanished back toward the HOA side of the valley. That's when I realized Daphne was escalating. When someone like her feels ignored, they don't quit, they double down. I sat on my porch, refilled my coffee, and waited. Sure enough, less than an hour later, I saw her. She'd traded her yoga outfit for desert camouflage, a floppy hat, and combat boots that looked about as comfortable as a tax audit. Binoculars in one hand, a walkie-talkie in the other. On her hat, stitched in bold white letters, it said Commander-in-Chief. I nearly choked laughing. I didn't walk over. Didn't need to. She saw me watching. She froze her binoculars, lowering an inch. For a long second, we just stared across the scrubland, two generals in a war neither of us had declared, but both clearly ready to fight. Finally, she stood up, brushed cactus needles from her pants, and stomped back to her Prius. The car fishtailed once in the dirt before speeding away. That night, my phone buzzed. A neighbor had tagged me in a Facebook post. The title read, "Community Under Siege, My Battle for Aesthetic Integrity." The post was nearly 1,000 words long. Daphne accused my windmill of psychological disruption, claimed my lawn ornaments disturbed the harmony of desert living, and described my goat pickles as a menace to neighborhood birds. She even attached a drone photo, grainy tilted, with me standing in the frame holding a wrench. Caption: suspect possibly modifying windmill without approval. I couldn't stop laughing. But underneath the humor, something colder started brewing. Because here's the thing about people like Daphne, they can weaponize paperwork faster than most people can boil water. And behind the pearl necklaces and community values, speeches, there's a hunger for control that never sleeps. So, I made a choice. I wasn't going to sit back while some self-appointed suburban dictator rewrote the rules of private property. I decided to play her game only better. That evening, I walked out to the gate with a flashlight. The laminated violation notice still hung there, brittle and sun-faded. I peeled it off carefully, turned it over, and on the blank side wrote in bold, Sharpie notice of non-compliance property, not subject to HOA authority. Then I stapled it right beneath the HOA sign and added a smiley face at the bottom. By the next morning it was gone. Someone, I'm guessing Daphne, had come in the night to remove it. But I left behind a trail camera hidden in the fence post. The footage, priceless. There she was at 2:13 a.m., wearing a reflective jogging vest and latex gloves, flashlight between her teeth, as she unzipped the notice and muttered, "He thinks he's clever." The best part, she tripped over Brutus's feed bucket on the way out. So yeah, you could say things were heating up between us. And I had a feeling this little territorial dispute was only getting started. I didn't realize it yet, but by the time the sun set the next day, my quiet ranch would turn into the epicenter of the strangest HOA battle. Silver Butte County had ever seen a battle that would involve drones, lawsuits, flamingos, and one very grumpy bull with excellent aim. But that comes next. By the time the next morning rolled around, I thought the worst had already passed. I figured Daphne would be too embarrassed to show her face after her cactus camouflage fiasco. But when I heard the crunch of tires on gravel outside my gate, I realized she wasn't retreating, she was mobilizing. From my kitchen window, I saw a white SUV rolling up the road, kicking up clouds of dust like a storm front. The side door bore a decal I hadn't seen before, Sagebrush Meadows Compliance Patrol. It looked professional enough to fool anyone who didn't know better. But to me, it screamed Daphne's latest hobby project. 4 people stepped out. I counted them the way a man does when he's deciding if he should lock the door or grab his coffee and enjoy the show. 2 were teenage boys, khaki shorts matching polo shirts, bike helmets still on their heads like they were expecting incoming fire. 1 older man with a paunch and a clipboard strutted up the path like he was back on active duty in 1983. The last one, a skinny guy with sunburned knees, carried a tape measure and the defeated energy of someone who lost a bet at a barbecue. I stayed quiet, leaning against the porch post, just watching. They huddled for a moment at the gate, pointing at my barn, then at my windmill, then whispering to each other like they were plotting a raid. The clipboard man raised his voice. "All right, team, remember professionalism, courtesy, and documentation. Let's make this quick." Professionalism? I thought right. When they opened the gate without asking, Brutus lifted his head from the trough, nostrils flaring. The longhorn had a sixth sense for nonsense, and I could practically hear him sighing. I stepped out, wiping my hands on a rag, and waited until the group made it halfway up my path before I spoke. "Morning, folks," I said. They froze. The clipboard guy cleared his throat. "Good morning, sir. We're here on behalf of the Sagebrush Meadows Homeowners Association to perform a visual compliance inspection of your property." "Uh-huh," I said. "And which part of Sagebrush Meadows is this land in?" The skinny guy looked down at his clipboard. "Technically, it's, adjacent to Sagebrush Meadows, sir." "Adjacent," I repeated. "That's a fancy word for not included, right?" He hesitated. Well, our board recently passed an amendment allowing visual regulation up to a half-mile beyond the HOA perimeter for aesthetic consistency. I couldn't help it, I laughed. A deep involuntary laugh that startled even me. You mean you're regulating the view now? The two teenagers exchanged nervous glances. One of them whispered, "He's laughing, dude," like it was a bad omen. Behind me, Brutus snorted a low rumbling sound that vibrated the air. The older man stiffened. "Sir," he said carefully, "we're just here to take measurements for record purposes. If everything's in order, we'll be gone in a few minutes." "Tell you what," I said, crossing my arms. "You can take all the measurements you want on your own property. Out here, you're trespassing." Actually, he started under subsection B of our visual. That's when Brutus took one slow step forward. The bull's horns were nearly 6 feet across, curved and gleaming in the morning Sunday. He wasn't charging, he didn't have to. He just looked at them calm but unimpressed, like a judge delivering a silent verdict. Clipboard man swallowed hard. We'll come back later." "You do that," I said. "Bring donuts next time." They turned as one unit and retreated to their SUV in record time. One of the teenagers dropped his tape measure and didn't even try to retrieve it. When they were gone, I walked up, picked it up, and tied it to my gate as a souvenir. Brutus flicked his tail and went back to chewing. "Good boy," I said. "Diplomacy achieved." That afternoon, I called Mira Delgado my friend and the closest thing Silver Butte County had to a folk hero lawyer. Mira used to be a prosecutor in Phoenix, before she decided city life was too loud and bureaucratic. These days, she ran her office out of a converted snow cone stand behind a mechanic shop. Her secretary was a tortoise named Carl. When I told her about Daphne's latest stunt, she laughed so hard she nearly spilled her iced tea. "Let me get this straight," Mira said, wiping her eyes. "An HOA that doesn't even include your property sent a compliance patrol with miners to inspect your windmill. That's about the size of it." She grinned. "Colton, you're about to make my week." "Give me that notice," they posted. I handed her the laminated sheet. She scanned it like a hawk reading a menu, then opened her laptop. "Ah," she said after a minute, "here we go. According to Silver Butte County zoning maps, your ranch has been designated agricultural legacy property since 1894. That makes you exempt from any private subdivision ordinance, unless the county board says otherwise, which they won't." "In English?" I asked. She smirked. "It means Daphne's HOA has about as much legal authority over you as a book club has over the public library." I chuckled. "So what do we do?" Mira started typing, her fingers clacking like a machine gun. "We send her a response, formal, polite, and devastating." The next morning, I mailed a certified letter to the Sagebrush Meadows HOA office. Inside was a neatly printed statement on Mira's letterhead that read, "The property known as Hale Ranch Parcel 112B lies entirely outside the jurisdiction and charter authority of Sagebrush Meadows Homeowners Association. Any further attempts to impose policy inspection or surveillance on said property will be considered harassment under state and federal statutes." At the bottom, we'd signed it together, and for good measure, I'd pressed one of Brutus's muddy hoofprints right under my name. Mira said it added character. 2 days later, word got around that Daphne had received the letter. According to Linda Park, the HOA treasurer and the only sensible person in that entire neighborhood, Daphne screamed loud enough for her cat to hide under the sink. But I knew better than to think it was over. Women like Daphne didn't back down. They regrouped. And regroup she did. By the weekend, drones were buzzing over my property like mechanical mosquitoes. Every time I looked up, there was another one, low, deliberate, always hovering just far enough away to make me question whether I should call the sheriff. But the sheriff, a guy named Dale Givens, was already on my side. When I stopped by his office, he leaned back in his chair and grinned. "Colton, you know I can't arrest someone for flying a drone unless they cross a privacy or safety threshold. You want to make her mad. Start charging her airspace rent." I smirked. "Don't tempt me." Instead, I documented everything: dates, times, flight patterns, even video footage from my trail cams. I wasn't just fighting back, I was building a case. And sure enough, Monday morning, Daphne doubled down again. When I stepped outside with my coffee, something caught my eye at the fence line, a brand new tree. A young ash tree, freshly planted in the night roots, barely covered. Attached to it was a shiny sign, a gift from Sagebrush Meadows promoting unity and shade. I stood there staring at it, jaw slack. Then I noticed the tire tracks leading back toward the HOA's paved road. They'd snuck onto my land to plant it. Brutus sniffed the sapling unimpressed. Pickles, my goat, took a bite out of the sign. "Good instincts," I muttered. I tied a red bandana around the trunk and renamed it Petty Tree. Then I took a photo, posted it on Facebook with the caption, "New addition to the ranch." already causing drama. It went viral by lunchtime. Within hours, locals were commenting things like free petty tree and down with tree tyranny. Someone even designed a t-shirt. Meanwhile, on the HOA Facebook page, Daphne posted a furious rebuttal about environmental disrespect and non-compliant humor. That night, I sat on the porch watching the sunset bleed into the hills, the windmill spinning steady in the warm wind. I didn't know it yet, but this was just the beginning of something bigger, something that would stretch far beyond one overzealous HOA president and a few drones. Because when a person like Daphne feels cornered, they don't surrender. They draft amendments. And I had a feeling the next one was already in the works. By Monday afternoon, the tension in Sagebrush Meadows could have powered a small power grid. The HOA Facebook group had turned into a digital battlefield. Half the posts were Daphne's long-winded community updates. The other half were memes of Brutus wearing sunglasses under the caption, "Local Hero." That's when Daphne made her next move. A knock echoed on my gatepost just after lunch. I wandered out half, expecting another laminated notice, but this time it was different. A man in a gray suit stood there, crooked eyes, bloodshot, clutching a legal envelope like it was radioactive. "Delivery for Mr. Hale," he said, from who he looked at the letterhead. Sagebrush Meadows Homeowners Association. Figures. I signed the receipt and opened it on the spot. Inside was a freshly printed amendment to the HOA charter. The title read in bold Territorial Aesthetic Integration Initiative. I laughed out loud. Oh, for crying out loud. The document was filled with bureaucratic poetry, phrases like visual jurisdiction, radius, and extended community perimeter alignment. The gist was simple. Daphne had rewritten the HOA rules to include all properties within visible proximity of Sagebrush Meadows, meaning anyone whose land could be seen from the HOA's boundaries. In other words, me. I scanned to the signature line. Daphne's elegant cursive curved across the page like a cobra ready to strike. It wasn't just overreach, it was a full-blown power grab. And she'd even scheduled a mandatory compliance hearing at her house that Thursday. The letter concluded with a flourish. Failure to appear will constitute admission of noncompliance and acceptance of corrective action. I whistled. She's got guts, I'll give her that. I called Mira right away. She picked up on the second ring, her voice muffled over the sound of Carl, the tortoise scraping against his terrarium. "Tell me she didn't." "She did," I said. "She wants to regulate everything she can see. My windmill, my barn, probably my truck if the light hits it wrong." Mira sighed. "All right, bring me the papers." When I arrived, she was sitting cross-legged on a lawn chair under a faded umbrella laptop, open iced tea sweating beside her. I handed her the amendment, and she skimmed it with the focus of someone reading the backstory of a bad sitcom villain. "This woman's unhinged," she muttered. "You realize this thing's not just void, it's potentially fraudulent. She's amending the charter without a recorded vote, no community approval, and applying it outside the recorded plat. That's a triple violation of state HOA governance code." I raised an eyebrow. "You can prove that," she grinned. "Colton, I can frame it." Mira pulled up county records, scrolling through decades of zoning documents, HOA filings, and plat maps. Within 15 minutes, she found the silver bullet, Clause 9. 8 amperes buried deep in the original HOA charter from 1989. It read, "No regulation, ordinance, or amendment shall extend HOA jurisdiction beyond the recorded perimeter of Sagebrush Meadows, nor apply to agricultural or legacy-zoned land parcels." It was right there in plain English, buried, where Daphne clearly hadn't looked. Mira printed it, slid it into a frame, and handed it to me. "Hang this in your living room." "Oh, I've got a better idea," I said. That evening, I mailed Daphne a framed copy with a note taped to the glass. "Respectfully declined. Sincerely, the Sovereign Republic of Hale Ranch." And just for flavor, I stamped the bottom corner with Brutus's muddy hoof print. 2 days later, Linda Park, Daphne's treasurer and former best friend, called me discreetly. "You didn't hear this from me," she whispered, but Daphne lost it. She screamed so loud her cat ran into the dishwasher. "She's calling emergency meetings in her living room now. No minutes, no votes, no agenda. Just yelling." "Sounds democratic," I said. "She's obsessed, Colton. She's rewriting the bylaws by hand. She calls it Operation Harmony." "Operation Harmony," Linda sighed. "Yeah. She says it's about restoring order, but she's diverting HOA funds for things. Drone contracts, consulting fees, branded merchandise. She even ordered a velvet banner that says, 'Lead with Lawns.'" I nearly spit my coffee. "You're kidding." I wish I was. She used $3,200 from the landscaping fund. At that point, even I was starting to feel like I'd wandered into a satire. But the thing about HOA money is it's everyone's money. The second Daphne used it for her personal crusade, she crossed into legal quicksand. Mira confirmed it later that night. That's embezzlement, plain and simple. She's treating HOA dues like a war chest. You could press charges if you wanted. Not yet, I said. Let her dig deeper. And dig she did. 2 mornings later, the buzzing returned, 3 new drones hovering over my ranch, one following Brutus like a paparazzi photographer, another circling my windmill. The third, I swear, was tracking Pickles. I stood in the yard, hands on my hips, watching them hum in lazy circles above my head. All right, Daphne, I muttered. You want surveillance. You got it. I went inside, grabbed a garden hose, and turned the water pressure to full blast. The drone dodged once, twice, and then took a direct hit. The camera sparked, tilted, and fell like a stunned insect into the dirt. Brutus bellowed approvingly. Pickles jumped on the wreckage for good measure. I smiled, rinsed off my hands, and waited for the phone call that I knew was coming. Sure enough, 20 minutes later, my cell rang. Mr. Hale, Daphne's voice snapped through the speaker, crisp and quivering. You've just destroyed private property. Private property, I repeated. Funny, I thought this was a community drone. Didn't your last Facebook post call it an aerial neighborhood asset? That's irrelevant, she hissed. You'll be hearing from our legal counsel. Good, I said. I'll make coffee. The line went dead. By evening, word had spread. Someone leaked Daphne's voicemail rant to the local radio station, and within hours, it was the most replayed clip in Silver Butte County. DJs added sound effects, mooing, clanking windmills, even Brutus's bellow as background noise. It would have been funny if it hadn't been so dangerous, because Daphne wasn't just angry anymore, she was desperate. Late that night, I caught movement by the fence line headlights cutting through the dark. A black SUV idled just beyond my property. 2 figures stepped out, carrying what looked like surveying gear. I grabbed my flashlight and walked straight toward them. Evening, I called out. Can I help you, gentlemen? One looked startled. We're with county planning, prepping for a boundary enhancement project. Boundary, what trail beautification? He stammered. Got the order yesterday from a Mrs. Whitmore. Did she also tell you this is private property? They hesitated. The second man mumbled something about maybe wrong coordinates, then they packed up faster than a jackrabbit under a hawk. When I called Mira, she didn't even sound surprised. She's trying to manufacture a fake county project to justify access to your land. That's criminal misrepresentation. Time to go public, Colton. So we did. We drafted a simple flyer, town hall meeting, HOA versus Ward 8. Hale Ranch, let's talk about boundaries, legal and otherwise. We booked the Silver Butte Recreation Center for Saturday afternoon, open invite to all county residents and HOA members. By Friday evening, word had spread like wildfire. Even the sheriff's deputy called to ask if he could bring popcorn. And as I stood on my porch that night looking out over the desert, the windmill spinning slow against the orange sky, I felt something shift. For the first time, it wasn't just me versus Daphne. It was me, the land, the law, and everyone tired of being told what color their soul had to be to match the neighborhood palette. This wasn't just about a windmill anymore. It was about principle. And come Saturday, the whole town was about to hear exactly how far one HOA president would go to defend her imaginary empire. By Saturday morning, the air in Silver Butte felt electric, the kind of charge that hangs before a summer storm. The whole county seemed to know what was coming. Flyers for the meeting had spread far beyond Sagebrush Meadows. People were driving in from neighboring towns just to see the showdown between the HOA queen and the rancher with the windmill. When I pulled up to the Silver Butte Recreation Center, the parking lot was already full. Trucks, minivans, motorcycles, even a couple of horses tied to a fence post. Inside, the air buzzed with murmurs, coffee cups clinking, folding chairs scraping the floor. I could feel hundreds of eyes turn when I walked in. And there she was. Daphne Whitmore standing near the front like she was about to host a TED Talk on tyranny. She wore her signature cream pantsuit, pearl necklace, and a smile so rehearsed it looked laminated. Behind her, 2 HOA board members hovered nervously, one clutching a clipboard, the other scrolling through an iPad like salvation might come from a spreadsheet. When she saw me, her expression tightened just enough to crack the perfection. Mr. Hale, she said coolly, so glad you could make it. I hope you'll conduct yourself with civility today. I tipped my hat. I'll try, ma'am, but I can't promise the same for my attorney. Mira, standing beside me in a faded Hawaiian shirt and flip-flops, smirked. Don't worry, she said. I brought charts. Daphne's lips pursed. The county clerk, a soft-spoken woman named Trudy Mendoza, called the meeting to order. This is a public hearing regarding the ongoing dispute between the Sagebrush Meadows Homeowners Association and Mr. Colton Hale of Hale Ranch. She glanced between us. Each party will have 10 minutes to speak. Then we'll open the floor to questions. Daphne stepped up first. Her heels clicked against the linoleum like the sound of distant gunfire. Ladies and gentlemen, she began, voice smooth as silk and twice as slippery. For months, our community has endured visual and environmental disruption caused by an unregulated property bordering our neighborhood. While we value individuality, there must be limits. Without order, without consistency, society collapses. She paused for effect. We at Sagebrush Meadows believe in harmony, in beauty, in standards. And yet one man's refusal to comply with those standards has created division, hostility, and public ridicule of our community. His windmill, I couldn't resist. You mean the one built before your HOA existed? A ripple of laughter swept the crowd. Daphne's jaw twitched. His windmill, she continued sharply, has become a symbol of mockery and defiance. What began as a simple violation notice has escalated into social media slander, property damage, and an alarming act of aggression, namely the destruction of HOA surveillance equipment valued at over $2,000. Surveillance equipment, Mira said loudly. You mean the drones? Daphne shot her a glare. They were for environmental monitoring. Environmental monitoring, my flip-flops, Mira muttered. Daphne straightened her papers. Therefore, the HOA requests legal acknowledgement of our new amendment, the Territorial Aesthetic Integration Initiative, granting us visual jurisdiction within half a mile of our borders to preserve community standards. She ended her speech with a tight smile and a small performative bow. A few of her loyal followers clapped politely. Everyone else just stared. Then it was my turn. I walked up to the microphone, nodded to Trudy, and said, Well, folks, I'll try to keep this short. My name's Colton Hale. I own Hale Ranch, 280 acres of land that's been in my family for 4 generations. I pay my taxes, I fix my fences, I mind my own damn business. A murmur of approval rolled through the room. And for months, I continued, I've been harassed by an HOA that doesn't even have authority over my property. They've sent people onto my land, flown drones over my house, and tried to rewrite the law so they can tell me what color my barn should be. That's not harmony. That's harassment. Daphne opened her mouth, but I raised a hand. Hold on, I'm not done. I gestured to Mira, who stepped forward and connected her laptop to the projector. The screen flickered to life, revealing scanned pages from the Sagebrush Meadows Charter. Mira pointed to a highlighted paragraph with the precision of a sniper. Clause 9.8 amperes. She read aloud. States that HOA jurisdiction ends strictly at the recorded boundary line. Any attempt to extend it onto agricultural or legacy-zoned land is null and void. Mr. Hale's ranch falls under both categories. She clicked to the next slide, a digital map from the county recorder's office. See this line, she said, tracing a bright red border? That's the HOA. And this big green patch, that's Hale Ranch. No overlap. None. Zilch. Daphne's smile faltered. That map is outdated, she blurted. Updated last year, Mira shot back. Certified by the county board. You're done. The audience erupted in whispers. A few people started clapping again, louder this time. But Mira wasn't finished. She flipped to another slide showing itemized HOA expenditures. And just for fun, she said, let's talk about these. Under community beautification, the list showed absurd purchases. $3, 200 velvet banner custom embroidery lead with lawns. $1, 750 drone consulting classified. $480. Catering for Operation Harmony Strategic Luncheon. $299. Commander Daphne coffee mug, set 12 units. The room gasped. Someone near the back shouted, Our dues paid for mugs, Mira grinned. Oh, and my personal favorite, $92 billed as cloud removal. Still trying to figure that one out. Laughter broke through like thunder. Daphne turned red. That information was taken out of context, she snapped. Sure it was, Mira said. Probably just a coincidence that all those expenses came right after you declared war on a windmill. At that point, the meeting was chaos. People were whispering, arguing, standing up. Even the board members behind Daphne looked ready to melt into the floor. Then, from the third row, Linda Park rose slowly. Her hands trembled as she adjusted her glasses. I have something to say, she announced. The room fell silent. Linda turned toward Daphne. I was your treasurer for 5 years. I signed off on those expenses because I trusted you. I thought you were doing what was right for the community, but you lied to us. You spent our money on personal vendettas." Daphne stammered. "Linda, I know." Linda's voice cracked, but her resolve didn't. "This isn't leadership. This is obsession." Trudy the clerk leaned toward the mic. "Would you like to make a motion?" Mrs. Park Linda took a deep breath. "Yes. I move that we hold an emergency vote to suspend President Whitmore pending a full audit of HOA finances." The room exploded in applause. Daphne shouted over the noise. "You can't do that. This meeting isn't official. You don't have the authority." Trudy tapped her gavel. "According to state HOA statutes, any member in good standing may call a special vote with 2/3 approval of present members. And judging by the hands in the air, every arm in the room went up. I'd say the motion passes." Daphne stood there, frozen pearls trembling against her neck. For the first time since I'd met her, she looked genuinely lost. Then she hissed, "You'll all regret this," grabbed her purse and stormed out. The door slammed behind her, echoing through the hall like a final gavel strike. I looked at Mira, who grinned and said, "And that, my friend, is what we call a community realignment." Outside, the sun was dipping low, bathing the town in gold. People poured out of the hall, chatting, laughing, shaking hands. Some clapped me on the back. Others thanked me for standing up. For the first time in months, the air felt lighter. But as I looked toward the distant hills of Sagebrush Meadows, I couldn't shake the feeling that Daphne Whitmore wasn't finished. People like her rarely fade quietly. They regroup, they rebrand, and they come back swinging. And if I'd learned anything from this war, it was that peace in an HOA's world never lasted long. For a brief, beautiful moment, it felt like the war was over. The next morning, the local newspaper ran a headline that made me spit out my coffee, laughing, "HOA president suspended after attempting to regulate windmill." Below it was a picture of me standing next to Brutus, who looked heroic as ever, with the caption, "Rancher refuses to bend to HOA tyranny." Silver Butte had its new favorite story. But peace, I've learned, doesn't last long in the desert. It's as fragile as a porch light in a windstorm. By the end of the week, Daphne Whitmore vanished from public view. No Facebook posts, no HOA announcements, not even a single Prius sighting. The HOA board, led temporarily by Linda Park, promised a full audit and transparency moving forward. Folks started relaxing. I even caught myself thinking maybe, just maybe, Daphne had packed her pearls and moved somewhere else to terrorize a new subdivision. I should have known better. It started quietly. Small things, strange things. One morning I woke up to find the petty tree, the one she'd planted on my property, was gone. No hole, no roots, nothing but disturbed soil where it had stood. Just a small tag nailed to the fence. Reclaimed for community balance. That same night, Brutus wouldn't stop pacing. Around 2 a.m., I heard the faint hum of propellers. Drone lights flickered like fireflies beyond the barn. Only this time they weren't observing, they were mapping. Red laser dots danced across the dirt road, aligning into a grid pattern that swept toward the windmill. I could see their sensors scanning terrain. Whoever controlled them wasn't playing around anymore. These weren't toy drones. These were industrial survey models, the kind construction firms use for site planning. I recorded everything on my phone, zoomed in on their serial numbers, then went inside to call Mira. She picked up on the second ring, sounding groggy. "Colton, if this isn't about an arrest warrant or a dead cow, it can wait until morning." "Daphne's back," I said, and she brought toys. That woke her up fast. By sunrise, Mira was on my porch with 2 cups of coffee and a look that said she was equal parts furious and thrilled. "Show me," she demanded. I played the footage. As soon as the drones swept their laser beams across my windmill, she muttered, "Oh, hell no. That's a 3D topographical scan. She's building something." Building what? Mira tapped her chin. "I don't know yet, but it's illegal without FAA clearance and county permits. She's collecting data for a development project, or pretending to." And that's when the SUV showed up. A sleek black one, no plates, dustless, like it had just rolled off a dealership lot. 2 men stepped out wearing orange vests and hard hats, holding clipboards. I could feel Brutus tensing behind me. "Morning," I said, walking up. "You fellas lost." One of them smiled too wide. "County Infrastructure Division. Just performing a pre-survey for the Silver Butte Trail Expansion Project." "Funny," I said. "I'm friends with the county planner." "There's no such project." He hesitated. "Must be new. Our supervisor, Mrs. Whitmore, filed it yesterday." There it was, the smoking gun. I stepped closer, lowering my voice. "Let me make this simple. You're standing on private land without a warrant, permit, or sense of self-preservation. You've got 5 seconds to get back in that SUV before I let Brutus give you a proper tour." They bolted faster than a jackrabbit in a thunderstorm. Mira exhaled through her nose. She's escalating again. But now she's crossing into criminal territory, false claims, impersonating county authority, unauthorized drone surveillance. You ready to hit back? I nodded slowly. Let's do it. We spent the next 2 days preparing like generals before battle. Mira drafted cease and desist letters addressed to the HOA board, the supposed drone consultant, and one directly to Daphne herself. She also filed a formal complaint with the county sheriff's office for criminal misrepresentation. Then we went one step further. Mira contacted her old friend Deputy Marshal Harris, a federal compliance officer who specialized in land fraud. This woman's manufacturing fake municipal projects, she told him. We're not talking nuisance violations anymore. This is paper terrorism level crazy. Harris agreed to open an investigation. By Friday, the word had leaked. HOA members started whispering in grocery stores, on sidewalks, at yoga class. The phrase, federal investigation, spreads faster than gossip about infidelity in a small town. Saturday morning, I noticed a new post on the HOA Facebook group. It was from a user named DW Official. The profile picture was Daphne's familiar smile. The caption read, "They can laugh all they want, but progress cannot be stopped. The sagebrush renaissance has begun." Attached was a rendering, an aerial digital mock-up of sagebrush meadows, with my ranch included, divided neatly into lots labeled Phase 2, Harmony Estates. Mira stared at the post, speechless. She's trying to sell your land before she even owns it. I grinned grimly. Then it's time for her open house to get stormy. That evening, as the sun melted into the desert horizon, Mira and I parked a truck just outside the HOA clubhouse. It was packed. Daphne had called a community revival meeting. Flyers said, "Join the future, sagebrush expands for all." We waited until she stepped onto the stage. She wore a glittering silver scarf and a grin so wide it could split granite. "Friends," she began, "this is our next chapter. Harmony Estates will double our influence, improve property values, and unify the landscape. No more disjointed visuals, no more rogue ranch eyesores." That was our cue. Mira stood, raising her voice. "No more lies either, Daphne." Every head turned. We walked down the aisle slowly, the crowd parting. I held up a stack of papers, official documents stamped with county seals. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, "this is the sheriff's notice of investigation into fraud, trespass, and unauthorized drone activity, all linked to Mrs. Whitmore." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Daphne's face went pale. "That's ridiculous," she sputtered. "Those drones were for mapping beautification corridors." "Beautification," Mira shot back. "You sent fake surveyors onto private land, used HOA funds for personal gain, and tried to sell property you don't own. That's not beautification, that's criminal insanity wrapped in beige paper." Half the room started murmuring. Linda Parks stood up from the front row. "Daphne," she said softly, "is any of this true?" Daphne's voice cracked. I was protecting our community from what I asked. Windmills, goats, people who don't like beige stucco." She turned on me, her face twisted with fury. "You humiliated me. You turned my board against me, my neighbors against me. I built this community." "Yeah," I said quietly, "and then you forgot what community means." For a long second the room was silent, except for the hum of ceiling fans. Then Deputy Marshal Harris stepped through the back door's badge gleaming. "Mrs. Whitmore," he said, "we need to have a word." The silence shattered. Phones came out. People gasped. Harris read the warrant aloud. "Temporary seizure of HOA records, financial statements, and all electronic devices related to Operation Harmony." Daphne stood frozen, clutching her clipboard like it could save her. "This is outrageous," she hissed. "You can't," but Harris was already escorting her out. As she passed me, she stopped for half a breath, eyes burning. "This isn't over," she whispered. "You think you've won, but Harmony always returns." I smiled. "Sure, Daphne, but not on my land." She was driven away, pearls glinting under the fluorescent lights. The next morning, the HOA board met without her for the first time in years. Linda was voted interim president. She promised accountability, transparency, and most importantly, no more drones. I thought that was the end. But as I sat on my porch that evening, watching Brutus graze and Pickles chase tumbleweeds, I noticed something in the distance, a single white Prius parked at the edge of the dirt road. It didn't move. Not for an hour. Not for 2. Finally, I raised my binoculars. Through the windshield, I could see a blonde bun. And even from that far away, I could tell Daphne Whitmore was smiling. The war, it seemed, wasn't quite over. I didn't sleep that night. The sight of that white Prius at the end of my road burned into my brain like a brand. The desert was quiet, too quiet, except for the restless rustle of wind through the mesquite trees. Brutus pawed at the dirt, uneasy. Even Pickles refused to sleep in the barn, choosing instead to curl up by my boots like a guard dog with horns. By 3 a.m., the Prius was still there. No headlights, no engine running, just sitting in the dark like a waiting predator. I finally decided enough was enough. I grabbed my flashlight, slung my rifle over my shoulder not to use but to make a point, and started walking. The gravel crunched under my boots, echoing in the empty night. Halfway down the road, the driver's door opened. The dome light flicked on, and there she was, Daphne Whitmore, in all her late-night glory. Her pearls glinted in the yellow light like tiny moons. She was holding a folder stuffed with papers and something small in her other hand, a voice recorder. "Evening, Daphne," I said flatly. She smiled like a cat who'd found a new toy. "You've made quite the name for yourself, Colton. Local hero. The man who stood up to the HOA. Congratulations. Not looking for fame," I said. "Just peace." "Peace," she tilted her head. "You humiliated me. You and that barefoot lawyer of yours dragged my name through the mud. You think you can embarrass me in front of my own board, get me suspended, and then go back to your quiet little farm like nothing happened." She stepped closer, her perfume cutting through the dry air, sharp, artificial like plastic roses. "You don't understand what I'm capable of," she said softly. "You think this is over, but I've been busy. I filed an appeal with the county zoning commission. And guess what? They've agreed to a review of your property's classification." I froze. "You're bluffing," I said. She smiled wider. I found a loophole. Section 12 of the county's land use ordinance, properties with mixed aesthetic impact can be temporarily reclassified for oversight review. I made a presentation, brought visual evidence, your windmill, the barn, that ridiculous goat. I clenched my fists. "You went around the law." "No," she said calmly. "I used it, something you should try sometime." The wind picked up swirling dust around us. My heart pounded in my chest, part rage, part disbelief. "You're insane," I said. "You're actually insane." She didn't deny it. Instead, she handed me a folded paper. "Notice of review," it read, stamped with the county seal. It looked official, too official. "They'll be sending inspectors next week," she said, voice low and smug. "And once they confirm your property doesn't meet environmental harmony standards, guess what? It falls under temporary HOA jurisdiction." "That's not possible," I snapped. "You can't make the county work for you," she tilted her head. "Money talks, Colton, and so does influence. I may have lost the presidency, but not my reach." She turned to leave, then paused. "Enjoy your weekend. It'll be your last one as a sovereign republic." The Prius door shut, and the car rolled away, headlights still off. I stood there under the desert moon, gripping that notice until my knuckles went white. By morning, Mira was already on her laptop, coffee untouched. Her hair was tied back, her fingers flying over the keyboard like she was trying to beat time itself. "This document is legit," she muttered. "Stamped, filed, and processed. She must have bribed someone or pulled strings through one of her old donors. But it's real." "How bad?" I asked. "Bad," she said. "If the reclassification goes through, they can enforce temporary aesthetic restrictions, meaning they can fine you, demand alterations, even seize parts of your property if deemed non-compliant." I took a deep breath. So she found a legal way to invade my land. Mira slammed the laptop shut. "Not for long. I'm filing for an injunction first thing Monday. But we'll need evidence proof she manipulated county officials." "Think she left a trail," oh, Mira said, grinning darkly. "People like Daphne always leave glitter wherever they go." That afternoon, we drove into town. The county records office was a beige building with a single flagpole and a coffee machine that hadn't worked since the Bush administration. Inside, we met Wendell, the zoning clerk, mid-50 seconds nervous, always sweating. Mira went straight to work. "Wendell," she said sweetly, "we're looking for the petition that triggered the Hale Ranch zoning review. It should have a file number." He shuffled papers. "Can't share private petitions." She leaned closer. "Then maybe the public one attached to it." After a long pause, he slid a folder across the desk. "You didn't get this from me." Inside was a typed statement on letterhead labeled Harmony Expansion Task Force. And there it was. Daphne's signature at the bottom, right above a second name I didn't recognize. Councilman Gary Renshaw. Mira whistled. She roped in a politician. Lovely. We spent the rest of the day digging, and by sundown we had the whole picture. Renshaw had accepted consulting donations from Sagebrush Meadows, small regular payments logged as community partnership fees. Legal but slimy. He'd fast-tracked Daphne's petition through a loophole meant for public greenway projects. By the time we left the building, I could feel the fire in my chest. She's not just breaking rules anymore, I said. She's rewriting them. Mira nodded grimly. Then we'll burn her new rulebook. The next morning, I woke to the sound of engines, low rumbling official. When I stepped outside, 3 county vehicles were parked at my gate. Men in orange vests stood with clipboards surveying gear and cameras. One of them looked up. "Mr. Hale," he asked, "we're conducting an environmental visual assessment, routine procedure under the temporary reclassification order." I clenched my jaw. "Who sent you?" he hesitated. "The HOA's consultant, ma'am, Mrs. Whitmore coordinated the schedule with our department." "Of course she did." "All right," I said, calmly. "You can conduct your assessment from the county road. Step 1 foot past that fence, and I'll have you arrested for trespass." They didn't argue. They took their photos from the shoulder, murmured quietly, and left. But the message was clear. She'd managed to turn the system into her personal attack dog. That night, I sat on the porch, staring at the stars. The air was cool, the crickets loud, but peace felt fake, fragile. I knew Daphne wasn't done yet. I could almost imagine her sitting in that Prius, whispering to herself, plotting her next move like some HOA warlord in exile. And sure enough, the next morning it came. Not a drone this time, not a notice, but a bill. A crisp white envelope slid under my gate. Inside invoice. Property Hale Ranch violation, non-compliant windmill height, exceeding neighborhood aesthetic allowance. Fee $2, $750 payable to Sagebrush Meadows, HOA, due date immediate. I stared at it, then laughed so hard, I nearly dropped my coffee. Mira laughed too, the sharp, delighted laugh of someone about to ruin another person's week. "Perfect," she said. "That's fraud in writing. We've got her cold." She got on the phone with the county attorney, then the local press. Within 24 hours, the story broke. Suspended HOA. President issues fake fines, faces new federal review. The next evening, I received an email from Councilman Renshaw's office. Effective immediately, the zoning review for Hale Ranch has been terminated pending investigation. I read it 3 times before it sank in. Daphne's scheme had collapsed. Her little empire, once laminated and smug, was cracking apart. That night I sat on the porch with Brutus beside me and Pickles chewing on my bootlace, watching the windmill spin lazily in the moonlight. The desert was quiet again, finally, truly quiet. But I couldn't shake one last thought. Somewhere out there, Daphne Whitmore was staring at the same sky, probably sipping Chardonnay and muttering about visual disharmony. And I knew deep down, for people like her, defeat wasn't the end. It was the prelude to reinvention. Because the next war, it wouldn't be about the land, it'd be about reputation. And I had a feeling Daphne was already writing the next battle plan. For about 3 weeks, Silver Butte was quiet again. The kind of quiet that makes you suspicious. The county investigation into Daphne Whitmore's fake zoning petition went public. The local news ran 3 separate segments, and the HOA board under Linda Park's leadership officially voted to permanently revoke Daphne's membership privileges. She wasn't even allowed to attend meetings. It should have been the end. But I knew better. Because Daphne wasn't the kind of woman who needed a boardroom to start a war. All she needed was Wi-Fi, bitterness, and time. The first sign came one Thursday morning. I was sipping coffee on the porch when Mira pulled up in her dusty Jeep, face pale, holding up her phone like it was radioactive. "You've seen this?" she asked. I hadn't. She opened a video on Facebook already, with over 2,000 views. The title read, "The Dark Side of the Desert: How One Man's Windmill is Destroying Wildlife and Community Harmony." The thumbnail showed a heavily edited photo of my ranch under ominous storm clouds. The narrator's voice was unmistakable, Daphne's. She'd started a YouTube channel. The video was a fever dream of drone footage, dramatic piano music, and slow-motion zooms on my property. She called my windmill an industrial monstrosity, claimed Brutus the bull was a dangerous, unregistered exotic animal, and accused me of harassing a public servant during an environmental initiative. She even threw in a fake quote. "He told me, 'I own the wind,' before spraying my drones with a hose." Mira nearly choked on her coffee. "She's editing herself into a documentary about you." "Correction," I said. "A villain documentary." Over the next few days, Daphne's videos multiplied. Each one more unhinged than the last. Inside the Ranch of Rebellion, my near-death experience with the bull named Brutus. The cult of the windmill, when rural men go rogue. Property without purpose. A threat to every HOA in America. Her thumbnails showed me mid-blink, mouth open like some deranged desert troll. At first I ignored it. But the internet doesn't forget, and soon people from outside the county started picking sides. Some saw me as a folk hero. Others called me the anti-HOA extremist. The story went viral enough that a regional talk show invited me to defend my stance on community aesthetics. I declined, but Mira didn't. She showed up on live television wearing flip-flops and a t-shirt that said legally petty. She brought printouts of the HOA's fraud filings and calmly dismantled Daphne's narrative point by point. The only wildlife endangered here, she told the host, was Daphne's reputation. The clip got 500,000 views. By Sunday, hashtags like #windmill war and #HOA revenge were trending on Twitter. People started making memes. Brutus photoshopped into superhero costumes Daphne's face on Queen Elizabeth portraits with captions like "Lead with lawns." It was chaos, pure and glorious. But Daphne wasn't laughing. Late one night, I got an email from a burner account. No subject line, just a link to a private video upload and a single sentence, "You should have stayed quiet, cowboy." The video started with static, then cut to grainy night vision footage, my property filmed from across the fence line. Someone had been recording me walking to the barn, feeding Brutus, fixing the gate. The timestamps were from the last 3 nights. Jesus, I muttered. Mira watched over my shoulder. She's gone full psycho. This isn't just trespass, I said. This is stalking. She nodded. Then it's time we escalate too. The next morning I met with Sheriff Dale Givens. I showed him the video. He leaned back, chewing on a toothpick. She's losing it, he said. But here's a goldmine. I can get a restraining order and open a harassment case. Make it public, I said. You sure? Oh yeah, if she wants an audience, let's give her one. By that evening, the sheriff's department posted a statement confirming an active investigation into unauthorized surveillance fraud and online defamation by former HOA president Daphne Whitmore. The backlash was instant. Comments flooded her channel. Sponsors pulled out. Her latest upload, Truth Exposed the Rancher's Lies, got flagged and removed for misinformation. But Daphne didn't back off. She moved platforms, TikTok, Reddit, even an HOA Facebook group in another state. Her followers shrank, but the ones who remained were rabid. They called themselves the Harmonizers. And then one night, around midnight, I heard it again, the faint whir of propellers. I ran outside, flashlight in hand. A drone hovered over the windmill, its lights blinking red. But this time there was more. A voice, faint but mechanical, playing through a speaker. This is community property. You will comply. I stood there dumbfounded while Pickles bleated angrily and Brutus stamped the ground. The voice repeated louder. You will comply. That's when Brutus charged. The bull sprinted across the yard, horns glinting in the moonlight. The drone swerved too slow. Brutus jumped, headbutted the air, and the machine exploded into sparks and plastic. I swear the cheer I let out could have woken the dead. By dawn, the video was everywhere, caught on my trail cam, uploaded by Mira, with the caption, "When HOA meets real nature." It hit 1 million views in 2 days. News outlets called it the Battle of the Bull and the Drone. One late-night host joked, somewhere in Arizona, a cow just declared independence. It was funny until Daphne responded. She released one final video, shaky and rambling, recorded from her car. Her hair was messy, her eyes hollow, her pearls gone. You all laugh, she said, voice trembling. You think this is justice. You don't understand what I tried to build. Order, beauty, discipline. He destroyed it, he destroyed me. But chaos never wins. Communities need rules. Without rules, there's nothing. Then, staring straight into the camera, she whispered, "Enjoy your victory, Colton. Harmony always finds a way." And the screen cut to black. It was her last post. A week later, Linda told me Daphne had left town. Sold her house, deleted, her accounts disappeared. Rumor had it she moved to Utah, joined a minimalist HOA-free commune of all places. The county closed the investigation soon after. No charges were pressed. No one saw her again, but her legend remained. People in Silver Butte still tell stories about the woman who tried to conquer a ranch with a clipboard and a drone army. About the bull who took down a $2,000 piece of technology with one swing of his head. And me, I just went back to living. The windmill kept spinning, Brutus kept grazing, and Pickles kept eating things he shouldn't. Mira eventually turned our story into a podcast, Laws of the Land, the HOA Chronicles. The first episode went viral. She even got an offer from a streaming platform. Sometimes when tourists drive by my ranch, they honk or shout, "Don't let the HOA win." I just raise my mug and grin. Because they won't. Not here. Not ever. But still, some nights when the wind is just right, I swear I can hear the faint hum of propellers in the distance and the whisper of a voice that says soft as static, "You will comply." Then Brutus snorts and the night goes quiet. Again. Maybe it's just the wind. Maybe it's a ghost of bureaucracy that refuses to die. Either way, the war's over. And this time the land won. The windmill was creaking that morning, spinning lazy circles in the soft desert breeze. The sun was barely up, painting the horizon gold, and for the first time in months, I didn't wake up to the sound of engines, drones, or laminated notices slapping against my gate. Just peace, quiet, honest peace. Brutus grazed near the fence, his horns catching the light like polished ivory. Pickles was busy headbutting a feed bucket as usual. I leaned against the porch rail, sipping my coffee, and thought about how absurd the last few months had been. All that chaos, all those letters, cameras, Facebook posts, court filings, all because one woman decided that control was the same thing as order. When Daphne left town, I half expected another storm to roll in, maybe one of her followers trying to avenge her honor, or the county announcing a new visual harmony law in her memory. But none of that happened. Instead, something better took root. Silver Butte changed. Without Daphne's suffocating grip, Sagebrush Meadows started to breathe again. Linda Park took over as official HOA president, but she didn't rule, she listened. Meetings became open to the public, budgets transparent, fines reasonable. For the first time, residents felt like they actually lived there, not just rented their compliance. They even held a neighborhood barbecue one Saturday and invited me, the guy they used to call the outlaw rancher. I almost didn't go, but Mira convinced me. "You stood up to a laminated dictatorship," she said, grinning. "The least you can do is show up for free ribs." So I did. When I arrived, everyone stopped talking for a second. Then someone clapped. Then another. Before long, people were shaking my hand, laughing, offering drinks. Kids ran up to pet Brutus, who behaved like a celebrity. Pickles, of course, tried to eat the banner that said New Beginnings. Linda raised a glass. "To boundaries," she said. "Literal and personal." The crowd laughed, but the message stuck. That night, as I drove home under a sky full of stars, I realized that the story wasn't really about me or Daphne. It was about how easy it is for people, even well-meaning ones, to mistake power for purpose. Daphne thought she was protecting beauty, order, and peace, but what she really wanted was control to bend the world until it matched her own reflection. And maybe in her mind she wasn't the villain. Maybe she was just someone who couldn't live in a world where things didn't match. That thought stayed with me longer than I wanted. A month later, Mira and I sat on the porch again watching the sunset. She'd just wrapped the first season of her podcast, Laws of the Land. It had exploded in popularity, especially the episodes about Daphne's downfall. "People love a villain," she said, "but they love a comeback story even more." "You mean the HOAs?" I asked. She smirked. "Yours genius. You went from being the town recluse to a local legend." "Legend?" I chuckled. "I'm just a man who wanted to be left alone." She sipped her tea. "That's exactly why people root for you. Everyone's got a Daphne in their life, a boss, a neighbor, an institution that thinks they know better. Watching you stand up to her made folks feel like maybe they could too." I thought about that, about how all I'd done was refuse to be bullied. But in a world drowning in polite submission, maybe that was enough. "Think she'll ever come back?" I asked. Mira shrugged. "Maybe. But if she does, she'll come back as someone else. People like Daphne don't disappear, they just rebrand." We both laughed, but her words lingered. And then one morning, months later, I got a letter in the mail. No return address, but I recognized the handwriting instantly, that perfect looping cursive. Inside was a single line written on embossed stationery that smelled faintly of perfume. "Even the wind can't spin forever. D." I stared at it for a long while, then folded it neatly and tucked it under the frame of claws. 9.8 amperes hanging on my wall. The one Mira made me keep as a trophy. Maybe it was a threat, maybe a warning, maybe just her way of saying goodbye. Either way, I wasn't afraid. The windmill still spun, the ranch still stood, the land still belonged to those who respected it. That evening, I hosted another gathering, this time at Hale Ranch. Folks from Sagebrush Meadows showed up bringing food, music, and laughter. Even the sheriff came wearing jeans for once instead of a badge. We lit bonfires, grilled steaks, told stories under the stars. Someone brought out a guitar, someone else a fiddle. It turned into an impromptu concert. Kids danced barefoot in the dirt. For the first time, I saw what community was supposed to look like. Not committees, not fines, not regulations, written in Comic Sans, but people just being sharing the same air, the same land, without trying to own each other's choices. Halfway through the night, Linda tapped her glass and said, "This windmill's become more than just a landmark. It's a symbol of resilience, and on behalf of the HOA, we hereby declare it an honorary historical site. Everyone cheered. Mira leaned over grinning. You're officially HOA approved. You gonna cry, I laughed. Never, but maybe I'll frame the certificate. By midnight, as the fire died down and the crowd thinned, I sat back in my chair staring at the sky. The stars were endless, scattered across the black like sparks from a forge. The wind picked up, and the windmill began to turn again, steady, patient, defiant. I thought about Daphne somewhere out there still chasing harmony she could never find. And I hoped in some strange way she'd learn something too. Because if I'd learned anything from all this madness, it was simple. You can't force order on the world. You can only build peace where you stand. And sometimes standing your ground is the most peaceful thing you can do. I raised my coffee mug toward the windmill, a silent toast to every stubborn soul who refuses to bow to nonsense, every person who's ever been told to comply and decided instead to live free. The night wind whistled through the metal blades, singing its old familiar song. Brutus snorted softly. Pickles bleated in response, and for the first time in a long time, I felt something that didn't come from victory or revenge. It was gratitude. Gratitude for the land, for the people who fought beside me, for the quiet mornings that no HOA could regulate, and for the reminder that no matter how many clipboards, drones, or laminated rules come flying your way, freedom once earned doesn't fade, it endures, just like the wind.